Hello. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Norman Seligman. I'm the CEO of the Sydney Jewish Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here to this afternoon's book launch. John Phillips's book, While the Children Swung from the Chandelier. I came from Middelburg in the Cape. We didn't have chandeliers. But in Bethel, they clearly had them. So, a special welcome to Joan's family. I know three of her children are here together with their families, so welcome to all of you. I was contemplating whether I should in fact speak in English or Afrikaans, but I decided I know there are one or two Australians here this afternoon, so welcome, and I'll speak in English for the benefit of everybody. I'd like to congratulate Joan on this momentous occasion, and I'm sure, as you will hear from the speakers after me, that her book makes compelling reading. My wife has an aunt who came from London as well, as very similar to what you'll hear. And she was taken to a farm in Delmas, and she couldn't understand how she could ever have given up life in London for what she was going to see there. So it's a very similar little part of what I read in the book over there.
Launching her memoirs is a real privilege and a pleasure. And I believe this is a special occasion for each and every person here. Not least for Joan, who began to pen the first words towards the publication of her memoirs in 1996. Quite a long gestation period. And here it is in all its glory. Why wait to applaud? Let's give her a clap now. I first met Joan when I attended a selection conference, which used to be held very often, every year or two, at the Johannesburg Marriage Gardens, as it was then called. It was in 1971. The invitation to attend this conference was issued by Phyllis Gundel, who phoned me one day and asked me if I was interested in becoming a marriage counsellor. It just seems like yesterday when Phyllis phoned me, and it opened new directions for me, which I will be forever grateful for. At that time, Joan was either the chairman, the vice chairman of the executive, or the chairman or vice chairman of professional affairs, or the chairman or vice chairman of FAMSA, our national council, but she was never a treasurer. Joan has been called the mother of marriage gardens by more than one person. She even referred to herself as the old mother of marriage gardens in her speech at the opening of the Joan Phillips Wing at Family Life Centre in Johannesburg. And that was an addition to the main building, which was built shortly after we bought the main house because of the need, the increasing need for counselling, and later for the psychological clinic, the after-hours clinic, which was one of Joan's babies. And she did have many babies. In that opening, she called herself the Old Mother Marriage Gardens. And she went on to say that she didn't know she would become a building. These are a few of our favourite things. A walk in the garden, cuttings and slips. Look, growing like children, it's mothering and care. See, the flowers are almost here. These are a few of our favourite things. When the clouds gather, when problems hang heavy, when we are feeling sad, we simply remember our favourite things, and then we don't feel so bad.
Well, there is an African custom of having a praise singer. This was relevant when the praise singer was singing the praises of perhaps the greatest South African ever, Mandela. It was not so relevant when recently you saw a black man clad in leopard skin leaping around and talking to present the very unpopular President Zuma. But Jackie has certainly put me in a very high category. In fact, I'm a bit worried about what you're going to expect from me. Because at the end, Jackie, I am just a human being and a very imperfect one. You haven't dwelt on any of my faults, which are that I can be extremely judgmental and I'm very impatient. I get bored easily and show it, and I often adopt attitudes and ideas which are very unpopular, and find myself in the minority of one at a dinner table or a tea party. So there are plenty of flaws in this picture. Just take it all with a large dollop of salt. Now, I do want to talk at not great length, but to tell you how this came about. My 10-year-old granddaughter said to me one day, "What was it like in the olden days when you were young and wore those long dresses?" I think she'd seen a television episode of Pride and Prejudice. I said, "Well, I never wore long dresses, but I'll tell you a little bit about what it was like growing up." And as I started to tell her, I realized that in 1918, when I was born into a completely different society. And to chart the differences between that age and the age of today, really it would take another volume. And that I haven't attempted. I haven't attempted to sum up all the differences. But as you know, technology has absolutely revolutionized our lives. And many of the problems that Jackie has spoken about are now easily discussed, and what is more, found on the internet, and there are tweets and twitters. People are not backward in coming forward about their statements and their beliefs, and it's a very different sort of a world. So I started to write these memoirs, and then I thought it might be useful not only for future generations to see what it was like in the days that Grandma, or Auntie Podgie as they called me, lived. And that it might be an idea to get it into some kind of book form, which is how the whole project began. I arrived with a sheaf of these handwritten papers and handed them to Jackie Wasilewski, who immediately employed a copy typist, enrolled an editor, which I badly needed, to correct any mistakes that I'd made, to remove repetitions, to be sure that I wasn't too boring about this and too dismissive of that. And in Diana Geese, I found a fellow spirit who had the same ideas as I had. And when I disagreed with her, she was quite prepared to accept the disagreement. And then, on Diana's suggestion, a designer was brought in to design the formation of the book and to produce the cover, which after several selections I thought was very suitable. And I think you'll agree that the finished product is quite an interesting one, full of photographs of various times. None of us wearing long dresses, by the way. And I was encouraged in my writing of the memoirs by family and friends and relatives, and every time I told a little story about something that happened to me, a friend would say, "Oh, you've got to put that in your memoirs." So there are many anecdotes. The tone in general is fairly light, I think. Jackie, thank you for being my praise singer. I think you went a bit overboard because people are going to expect a great deal that they mightn't find. But Jackie is a person in her own right who has succeeded, and there is a building named after her, the Jackie Maravich Mediation Centre, and without her help, I doubt whether we could have achieved many of the things that our institutions have. Now, one of the things that happened was when I returned from London, full of new ideas and bursting with the need to share them with other people, I put up my shingle which said, "Joan Freed," my maiden name, child psychologist. There was a knock on the door soon after I'd done this, and a man looked at me and said, "Well, I've seen the child, where's the psychologist?" And then you must realise that in those days, psychology was a very strange concept, akin almost to witchcraft, and people who practiced it were like witches. All they wanted to do was to poke their noses into your business where they had no right to be. So I discovered that all sorts of the stories were circulating at tea parties and lunches about what Joan Phillips's children were like. Now, a very good start was somebody sitting out after a game of tennis and saying to my husband, Namie, "So what, your wife is a child psychologist?" "Yes," she said, "she is." "So what are your children like? Perfect, I suppose." "Oh, absolutely," he said. "Really?" she said, but no. "How many have you got?" "As yet," he said, "none." Which of course is the only time that your children are perfect. But there were all these stories apparently, they ranged from one end to the other. At one stage they were supposed to be perfectly programmed little machines because I went by the book and taught them to do exactly what they needed to do. On the other hand, somebody knew for an absolute fact that they were absolute wilde gees, wild beasts. They were never checked, never told not to do something. In fact, it was a fact that one of them was actually a juvenile delinquent, held up before the court. So from this comes the title of my book, which must have surprised many of you. While the children swung for the chandelier, she was building up a psychoanalytical career, which is part of a parody that my son David wrote to sing to me on my 80th birthday. In fact, at the end of the book you'll find this complete song, which really, in verse, according using the Gilbert and Sullivan model, sums up my life so far. I could not have done any of the things that I have helped to do without the support, the very ardent support that I got from like-minded colleagues, people who had the same sort of feeling as I had when I was bursting with new ideas. And I was just maybe a catalyst coming back from London to gather several of these groups together and to produce many of the institutions and organisations that Jackie has listed. I don't claim them as just my doing at all. There was one particular thing though, and in fact seeing people arriving here and actually sitting on the steps and so on reminds me of the fact that if you gave a talk about anything to do with a three-letter word, you could count on crowds attending. In fact, I do remember being quite overawed once at a lecture that I was giving called "Is Chastity Necessary?" And as it filled up and the steps were engaged and the windowsills filled up, I saw, I'm sure that those are engineers, the one who fail Maths 1 every year, and that they are going to create trouble. Whereupon Bishop Reeves, who was the chairman of Marriage Gardens at the time, said, but I see sitting in the front row Richard Goldstone. He's president of the SRC and I can always call on him in an emergency. But what did happen was that at one stage I mentioned the word masturbation, and yay, said the I stopped and I looked, I said, I'm so pleased the intellectual part of my audience agrees with me. I had no trouble after that. Now, this little word was a three-letter word. I mean, we've got used to four-letter words now. They're on every screen and every play and every film and novel. But this is a four-letter word, and that was actually banned from the airwaves. We had a program based on the Brains Trust, which was run during war in Britain. And there was a man on it called Ash Cricker, very excitable man, who said, you get into a railway carriage and you start talking about all sorts of things about religion and politics and sex. Oh, that was recorded on the Tuesday after lunch and played over the air on the Wednesday night, but no mention of sex. And I had the experience of talking to an extreme Calvinist Germany, we call them, and he said, now, Mrs. Phillips, I like the idea of your going into schools and talking to the children about family life, but do we have to have the sex? Germany, I said, it's very hard to have a family without having sex. But writing this in the early years of this century, I realized that perhaps I couldn't say that anymore. You take an egg from somewhere, a sperm from somewhere, you put them into a test tube, you implant the embryo in a surrogate mother, no sex. I don't know if that was would satisfy him. Now, there is also present here, actually, somebody who told me that he had come to one of my groups, as Jackie's pointed out, the Parent-Teacher Associations used to arrange for school for lectures after hours. I remember vividly the boys sitting in front of me and trying not to laugh as I talked about penis and testicles and vaginas, and he told me as an adult that after I left, they got together in a huddle and said, who is this woman who uses words like that? She must be a prostitute. So there you have it. There's a prostitute, reformed or otherwise, having the gall to lecture to you about what went on in those days. But I think you'll quite enjoy the book. It has some amusing anecdotes of that sort, and I came across many of them in the course of my career. There's just one story that I would like to mention, which isn't in the book, but I think, seeing we are in the Sydney Jewish Museum, where lehavdir, as Jewish people say, to distinguish, we're not talking about Holocaust survivors. We're talking about a very ordinary person who's lucky to have a peaceful life. But on this occasion, Bobby Kennedy had come out to South Africa in 1966 and had given a series of inspirational talks all over South Africa. And there was a meeting of Wit students at their great hall, and the chairman was going to be the president of the National Union of South African Students, Ian Robertson. No gathering to protest against the banning of this man was allowed, but it was circumvented by people, sympathisers, standing several feet from each other, all the way along the Jan Smuts Avenue just outside Wits. And my daughter Margaret, who's here today, was standing with a flaming torch and a placard round her neck. And she relates how a black man came up and read the placard. Revoke ban on Robertson. What is this, Jewish holiday? I thought it might have the effect of saying that on the whole, although certainly not every Jew was against apartheid, but Jews were expected, because of their past history of oppression, to side with the oppressed. And I think that is generally so. And this is what we have tried to do. Marriage Garden Society was non-racial from the start, and apartheid, we know, has been destroyed. What is in its place is not yet perfect, but at least we live to see that day. And I'm very glad that the period of gestation came to an end. It was pretty prolonged, and the baby was nearly post-mature. So it is available, and signed copies are available. And then I believe we are having some refreshments and time to chat a little bit. Thank you very much.